Here you are, BPMs high, sweat dripping, body moving, tongue panting. You're working hard, real hard, and you're thirsty. You need vitamins, nutrients for peak performance and energy. And your plants do too. Aw, I mean, just look at the little guy. Water-soluble plant food from Miracle Grow is full of essential nutrients. Just a little scoop into your watering can and boom, instant feeding and bigger, more beautiful plants. It's kind of like a sports drink for your plants. You may have to suffer from heat, but your plants do not.
I usually have to be thrusted into something, even if I know I needed to do that years ago. I just couldn't be a part of the machine anymore. And I had successful ministry. I turned to revitalize 3 churches from death to life. So it wasn't like, oh, you just didn't have good, successful, in whatever that means by the standards that people mark. It wasn't like my ministry wasn't beneficial or good, that I just couldn't do it anymore.
You are listening to the Liminal Living Podcast, a resource of practices and perspectives for those in dark nights and deconstruction.
All right. Yeah. I got my coffee. I got my brain somewhat moving again.
How do you get rid of my southern voice?
I will start speaking Southern, and then you'll just camouflage with me. So
okay, I like it.
Right, y'all?
Yeah, right, y'all?
You diggity.
Oh, let me tell you something.
What's that?
Tell me about that word, and then we'll get started. It was when we were in Michigan. We had, when I was with the Free Methodist Church, we were with, or it may have been a cohort on my doctorate program. I don't remember. But it was somebody that was out from the Northwest, and they told me, they said y'all a lot. And I was like, I asked them, are you from the South? And they were like, no, I grew up Washington, the Northwest, Pacific Northwest. And I thought, really? He said, why did you ask? I said, because you're using the word y'all. That's usually a Southern word. He said, we're starting to use it more because it's more inclusive. And I went, well, hot damn, I'm actually relevant.
You were relevant before it was cool.
Yeah, man.
Before being relevant was relevant.
Yeah.
Y'all I never thought of it being inclusive, but y'all is inclusive because it's you all. Yeah. And it's biblical because all the yous are y'alls. So you are Dr. Paul Jones. How does that sound to you? Like coming out? Like when I got my doctorate, I was like, yeah, y'all can call me Tom, and now I'm more comfortable being called doctor if they want me to. But Dr. Paul Jones.
It's weird because I'm very much just an ordinary person, and so yeah, I guess in certain contexts you expect it, but in everyday life, you know, it's like, I'm kind of, I grew up very blue collar, so that's, weird to hear Dr. Paul Jones in my name, so.
Yeah.
But I take it when I get it. I spent the time doing it, so.
I did not pay thousands of dollars to be called Mr.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'd rather be called doctor than reverend.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, doctrine implies to more things. So, Reverend, you used to be a pastor.
Yeah, I was a pastor for 20 years. I started really young. I'm only 40, but I started really young. I've done just about every position in the church except worship leader. And I've done that on occasion. Like, I can sing hymns decently well. So I can lead in that if I have to. But, I was a pastor for 20 years. Probably 13 of that I was full-time pastor. And so, I kind of had a radical conversion when I was in high school. And I guess I started young. I look at it and go, man, I was pastoring a church when I was 23. I look and go, what were those people thinking? So
Yeah.
But they had more to teach me than I had to teach them. So, but yeah, I started, grew up most of my life in Alabama. That's where I live now. We moved back a year and a half ago from Detroit and lived in the metro area. And I lived a little bit all over. Other than living in Michigan, I've lived in the South my whole life. Now we're back home and we're enjoying that. We wanted to get with COVID and all that. We just realized we wanted to get back closer to family, and so yeah, that's a little bit. I'm married. Been married for 15 years. Have 7 kids.
Dang, bro.
And it's a circus in my house all the time, but I love it most days. Some days it rattles my nerves, but I do love being a dad.
Nice. So what are you doing? You're no longer a pastor, so what are you doing currently?
So I own my own business. I work for a company called Gasket Rock out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I sell and install and run a company that seals the gasket seals on commercial kitchen equipment to make sure those things are in order, and so that's things the health department looks at and all that. But been doing that for 9 months. It's been a lot of work. I'm busy, but I'm excited. The business side of it's grown a lot quicker than I thought. But yeah, that kind of sums up what I do now, and really enjoying it.
So this transition between, being a pastor and now like getting out into the sales and installation world, like when did that transition like start to happen? Do you think, like, if you can, hindsight is 20/20 kind of a deal, like you're looking back on it, when did you start sensing a shift and a change, and what was driving that change, do you think?
Oh man, I can't really put a date specifically on it. 20 years ago, it was the dream to, I'd arrived if I could be full time. I was bivocational, as it was called. There's all this new lingo for it now that some people use, but I was working a job and pastoring this small little country church, and it was always my dream of being full-time ministry, and I got to experience that, and there was aspects of that I really enjoyed and loved, but one aspect of it that because I have such a large family, and even before I really had a large family, just getting my education, all that, I wasn't always in really large churches, and even churches just don't pay pastors very much, and I just really began to think I want to find a job that I can supplement my income, and but that was hard to do. Like, all my education is in religion, and so how do you go make the kind of money you need to make, and correlate that to a person in the business world who doesn't understand maybe the skills that you have really benefit the corporate setting, and even how to communicate that. So I would say probably 10 years ago, I began to think, man, if I could just, find the right fit. And but I told one of my mentors, I said, all this stuff's about entrepreneurial, church planting and all that. I said, and and I told him, he was retired. I said, yeah, it's easy for you all to say that, you need to say co-vocational or bivocational. Don't, you can provide for your family, but you were full-time all the time. And it's easy when you're starting out in your early 20s. You may not be married or whatever. But what about us in the middle? It's hard, and it was still hard doing it, but what kind of brought me to that place of having to do that is I entered a dark night of the soul. My whole world kind of just crumbled. All my belief systems, everything, I felt lost. And I just went, I cannot pastor anymore. I just can't do it. I'd had some trauma, and I just really began to think about, Jesus said to count the cost, but did he mean this? And now being out of it for 9 months, it was hard because there was still a transition, because I had to build a business, so financially it was tough, but we're starting to see some light at the end of the tunnel with that. I would say it started 10 years ago, but I'm pretty stubborn, and so I usually have to be thrusted into something, even if I know I needed to do that years ago. I just couldn't be a part of the machine anymore. And I had successful ministry. I revitalized 3 churches from death to life. So it wasn't like, you just didn't have good, successful, in whatever that means by the standards that people mark. It wasn't like my ministry wasn't beneficial or good, that I just couldn't do it anymore.
You mentioned dark night of the soul. Like, when did that hit? Like, when did that start like, sometimes it just hits like a ton of bricks, and sometimes it's been rumbling for a while, and then you notice it. So how was your entry point into the dark night? Do you remember when you really identified it as this is what's going on?
I would probably say September of October of 2021. I began to say, in the early summer of that year, I began to say, I feel like it's almost like I'm ready to break. Like, I even said, like, I feel like God's trying to break me. But I didn't know what that meant. But I would say in September, October, maybe even August, I can't remember, late August, but somewhere late summer, early fall, I just woke up. I actually felt like I was going crazy. Like, I just looked at my wife and said, I can't do this anymore. I didn't know if I believed in God anymore. I felt like I wasted my life. I spent all this time in education, poured my heart and life sacrifice. We're realizing being out of it for 9 months or so. The trauma me and my wife both suffered. Even the thought of going back into it triggers her. And so I'm never going to close the door, but I won't be surprised if I never pastor again in the typical, when you say pastor or reverend or priest or whatever, what people will think of in their mind.
Like full-time pastor, yeah. That's your career.
I will never be full-time again. I never want to take another. I don't want my soul-based income to be off the church. I think there's some things that go with that are not healthy for pastors. But if someone does it, that's fine. It's just me. Like I don't want to do that anymore.
So when you woke up 9 months ago and you were like were you still a pastor at that point?
Yes, we were actually, looking to plant the church back home, and yeah, I mean, I was in the process of doing that. Had raised a pretty good bit of funds, and I just woke up and said, I can't be a part of the rabbit anymore, and some of that comes from like and we've heard for years, oh, the church is in decline. The church is in decline. Church planting. We need to plant more churches. Well, they started thinking that in the 1930s and 40s, and that's some of the movements that came out of that. And you can argue, it's in decline. Some of it's not keeping up with population growth. I mean, and all that. But I've always, I don't know. It's like, if this isn't working, then why do we keep doing it? And I had very much, I was an athlete in high school, and so I had the mindset of, well, to get better, you got to work harder. And I saw my neighbors on the street that I mean, I live in the heart of the Bible Belt. The joke is, and this is not, we have more evangelical churches in Alabama than any place in the nation. And the joke is, it's not a diss against Southern Baptists, but Southern Baptists rule Alabama. Like, the joke is, Southern Baptist Convention is stamped on your birth certificate when you're born, because there's so many, like, for some people in certain contexts, I mean, I grew up in a county of 100,000 people, in a small town of about 2,500, and you wouldn't really know, like, it was a military community, and so, for years, and, I grew up in a decently urbanish, mixed with country type setting. But if you just took my small town I grew up in of Weaver, Alabama, of 2,000 people, in some places in the country you would think, well, there's 5 or 6 churches. There was like 20 churches. Like, I mean, you can literally, I grew up in a mega church. I mean, and there was 4 mega churches within less than a quarter mile of each other. And
a quarter
where
mile?
I grew up. I mean, yeah. And so even people who don't go to church, you find it more now, really unchurched people, but more now in the Bible Belt. But it's rare to find those, because that's never had any experience with church or Christianity or religion or anything. Most people in my context, they know what church is, even if they hadn't went since they were kids. And so I just couldn't do it. So I just woke up and said something. I was pressed against the wall, and something had to change.
You mentioned chasing the rabbit and being a part of the machine, and what does that look like for you, or what does that mean for you? Because humans organize themselves around structures and political systems wherever we are, And then we start introducing religion into the mix, and it gets a little messy because, yes, we need to organize ourselves around things to stay organized, and otherwise it's chaos. But at the same time, it's like we can turn the organizational thing into the thing, into what we worship, a golden calf, the thing. So, like, you talk a little bit about what you mean when you're talking about being a part of the machine or chasing the rabbit or being the rabbit.
Everything that starts eventually gets institutionalized. It doesn't matter what it is. I'm not even talking about religion. I mean, you study organizational structures. Eventually, they become so institutionalized, and if we're not careful, they become so rigid that they don't risk anymore. They don't try anymore, and so they get stagnant and die out. I mean, and so, or they think they are the end all be all. So I'm not necessarily saying institutions are evil, because you do have to have some order. You just, it would be great to live a life just willy-nilly, but you're never going to get anywhere. In a organization is never going to grow or be successful without structures and systems. Even my own business, I've got to have systems in to help me scale and grow. Like, there's only so much I can do, and so you have to think about that. But when I mean the rat race or the rabbit running, the machine is, we will always, we created it. I mean, we can't blame in the church. We created, and part of this culture created it. Like, we will always have celebrity pastors. I think they will be less and less because, and the reason I say that is our culture in America really values celebrity culture, and so it's like the old saying of trying to keep up with the Joneses. There's only so much people that you're going to be able to draw from, and so it's trying to pull this person or pull that person or to make budget or reach this attendance. And I had to come to the realization of, you can't make people change, but I thought you could. And if you do this, then it's promised this. Well, even though I had a lot of success in ministry, I wouldn't consider my ministry at all a failure. There was aspects of trying to be the best or one up. Well, we got to do it better. Like, I mean, if you were on social media and you follow a church or churches, you don't want to miss this Sunday. It's going to be the best. Well, Babe Ruth didn't hit a home run every time he got up to bat. I mean, you can't. And so the machine, if we're not careful, we're in it. Like, well, I got to grow by 20% this year, or I got to grow by this, or my church needs to become more relevant, and so I need to destroy all these sacred cows. And I'm like a bull in a china shop. I move very fast. Most churches I've pastored have doubled, if not tripled, within a year in size. One church I served grew by, it started out with 20 in a small town of 3,000, and by the first year it was 130. Well, I look back on that, and I never had the system, and so it felt like it was just never enough. There was always something. Like the old saying, if I just had a little more money, well, you always then need a little more money. And so I think in myself, it was an ego thing. I needed to prove something to people and to myself. And so in that, I never rested. I used to say, I'm going to ask God why he made us sleep, because sleep is stupid. and eventually my body, and if you're performing, no one's going to stop you. No one's going to come and tell you put these boundaries in. That's rare. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but that's rare. When you're in it, it's hard to see how to move past it. So when I say the rat race, as a pastor, you got 50,000 things on top, and you're expected to drop. You're not only expected to take care of you, your church, and you and your responsibilities. You're there to be there for other people, and so you carry their weight on your shoulders. And some people say, well, you need boundaries. Well, okay, yeah. I thought I had pretty good boundaries until I didn't. And then some of it was a political thing. In the era of Trump, I saw a lot of what I thought good Christians, and I saw this. I was a part of an organization in my teen years that was it was racist, and I saw Christian nationalism building years ago, and I just saw a lot of people overlook what Jesus said. We all do that anyway, but overlook a lot of things so that they can have power. And if it was really honest, it was so a black man, because they didn't like a black man being in office. And so it's just all the bull crap with all that. Like, it just became a big mess. And then COVID happened, and, well, none of us knew what to do. So.
Yeah, that's for sure. So then you just like woke up one day and it all of this stuff that's been building like just hit you, and then you're just like, I don't even know if God exists anymore. I don't know what faith is. I don't know where my place is in all of this. And
everything I'd ever studied. And I'm saying this, I don't saying this to brag, but I have 5,000 plus books in my library. Well, you know where they are now? They're in my garage. From when I moved, I just didn't have an office because we were trying to start a church. And so, yeah, it all fell apart. I didn't care what Jesus thought. You know, people, well, what did Jesus think? And I didn't care. And it wasn't, the problem is I created a God who wasn't Jesus, but I thought he was. I thought I had to count the cost and sacrifice my life. And, you know, Jesus died for the church. I don't have to. But I was extremely tired. And for the first 2 months, I mean, I probably slept 12 hours a day, easy. And I would just say, a couple of months ago, I finally started feeling some energy come back. I just given myself to it, and I bought into a lot of illusions. And and God, I don't know if God brought me to it. I don't want to say that. I just couldn't do it anymore. Mm-hmm. It just all felt false. I thought religion was the biggest waste of time. I thought it was man's biggest trick to manipulate society. And but at the same time, there was something in me that couldn't become an atheist. Like, I just couldn't do it. Like, my soul was rejected that because I couldn't deny that Jesus had done something in my life. But the God that I had was not the God of the gospel. I very much felt like I was the church's whore. And when it was done with me, it was done with me. Like, I had all these pastor friends, and through this time, I'd reach out to some of them. And they were nowhere to be around.
That's gotta be rough. People that you were like working with alongside of, and then you're at the point where you're at your most need, and bam.
Yeah. I felt very like, now there was some, I'm not saying there wasn't any, but that's where it felt like that's where I assessed, oh, this is a machine. And I had to look at myself and go, well, I was the same way. Like, you're just so busy. You don't have time for extra. So I'm not pointing fingers going, woe is me. I'm going, something's not healthy about this. And it's got to change or it's going to destroy people. And so, yeah, it was the loneliest time of my life. I mean, I thought, I was just ready to die. And at some point, I wouldn't have ever done that. But, I mean, sometimes it felt like death was better. I very much understood in the story of Job where, Job's wife said, just curse God and die. I was like, if that's all it takes, let's do it. It was just so much weight and pain. It hurt. It just hurt to feel, I did all this, and then it just made me go, this is not the love I read about in the gospel. But that's not pointing a finger saying, oh, they should have taken better care of me. It was just like, oh, we've created a system that just, I think Jesus would flip tables about.
Yeah. And then you got run over by the system that you helped make.
Yep.
Which is rough. I mean, that's like when you're in the midst of this, like, what helps did you look for? Like, what were you reaching out for? Who were you reaching out for? Like, how are you trying to find some sense of sanity or centering or something?
So, I started going to counseling. I thought that was helpful. And then you and I got connected to a mutual friend of ours for spiritual direction. And so you've helped. The counseling was great. You've helped cultivate some practices in my life, and it helped me slow down for spiritual direction. I knew I had to pull away, and then I love to fish. And I started fishing 4 times a week. Now, I wouldn't go, I'm talking about like just go out on the bank somewhere and fish, and walk around and just for like an hour or two. But people have always asked me, what do you think about when you fish? I don't think about anything. Like, the first time my mind shuts down. And so I had to I started focusing on my health, and I started focusing on what I could control in the sense of my health, spending more time with my family, working through it. And for me, it was stepping away. And that may not be for everybody, but for me, that was my journey. That was the road that I began to create my walking, as Brian McLaren wrote about, but, and I had to start working on my inner self, I always thought that was real frou-frou, like, I just didn't have a real, I had to find my true self. I was living off ego so bad. If ego was a stimulant, man, I was wired, So yeah, I had to slow down. I had to go. I had to admit things. I had to face hard truths. And that's why I'm not blaming anybody. I helped create the world I lived in that fell apart. And so I had to face some hard truths and start realizing my limitations. If someone told me I couldn't do something, you don't tell me that. I will prove you wrong, and I will die proving you wrong. Mm-hmm. That was my mantra. Now I'm like, I'm 40. I can't, I can't step to 3 o'clock in the morning and go to work at 4 days a week like I could 20 years ago. Yeah, I don't know. So the anxiety started going down. I still have triggers. It's hard for me to go to church right now, but I'm trying to work through that.
So when you diagnosed the problem in the church, that as you saw it, you used the word, machine, mechanized. Like, how would you, if you could sum it up maybe in like a sentence or two, what do you see is or a couple of the major issues that we're facing right now as a religious institution or a denomination or a faith, a religious system? Like, what do you see as like the problems? You mentioned, political power. Like, how are you seeing things? You got run over by the bus that you were driving, so like what are the problems that you're seeing that are contributing to this?
There's no place in denominations or really churches, many of them, can't say absolutely, but in my experience, it never lets you doubt, never lets you question. It's all about the ABCs, attendance, building, cash, or butts, and one of the issues is we've got an unhealthy perspective on the Great Commission. And we've got we're in the wrong place in the bus. And I'm no Calvinist by any means. I'm more Wesleyan, Arminian type in my theology. But one, you can't force anybody to accept Jesus. And I think I heard a podcast, and it makes a lot of sense. Megachurch style of thing, it works. Yeah, and I agree with that statement. But it's dependent on, there's as many people going out the back door as there is coming in the front door. So it's a circular. And I think we think it's our job to save the world. And now I think it's our job to be a part wherever we're at. It doesn't have to be grand. So how does God work through us to heal the world? So, I don't think there's anything wrong with church planting. I don't think there's anything wrong with churches growing. But we've made it seem like it's just plug and play. Well, just do this, and it works. Well, no, not always. Sometimes, like if a church didn't want to grow 50 years ago, you coming in thinking you could change it all over 50 years, 50 years of stubbornness, you're not going to change that overnight. I was lucky to find 3 situations where they were either going to close, and so they were ready. But I think I don't sum anything up in one sentence, but we got to get back to a holistic view of church. It's not about growth. It's not about how many people you baptize. There's some soul, if you take the parable of the sower and the soil, there's some soul that it's going to take a long time to till up and get ready. And, I think we have to quit comparing ourselves. I think of Eugene Peterson. He never pastored a large church. I mean, it was a good-sized church. But most of my friends say, man, he was a pastor to pastor. And, yeah, you got to slow down. We got to slow down and start. We got to get back to the roots of what it means to love people and not just get them saved.
That's a really good point right there. Like, we love not for the purpose of love itself, but we love for the purpose of growing our church or growing our system or our structure or whatever. And love itself can't have love is an end, not a means. You don't love your spouse so you can get brownie points, and get favor. You love your spouse because they're your spouse and you love, and that's what love does.
Like I don't know if you heard this, but growing up I heard this. Well, I don't agree with this position on that or that person, or I don't like them, but I love them because Jesus told me to.
Yeah, I don't see how that actually works.
That's a bunch of bullshit. That's not love.
I don't like you, but I love you. And I think that's a way of being like, I don't love you, and I'll just accept you. I don't know how. It's like there's like I'm going to keep you at arm's distance because I don't like you, but I'll convince myself that it's okay by saying I still love you. It's like a mental trick,
And I'm an introvert in a lot of ways. I love people, but I'm an introvert. But really loving people, it's very irritating because it's messy. And it's not easy. It's probably the hardest thing any of us could do. I had a person wear a political shirt that I didn't agree with the other day. A neighbor and a good friend. And when I saw it, I automatically went, "Oh, that person's an idiot." If they just had and I felt, I don't really know love, so I know how to love that person, even though I disagree with them. And I think there's a way to do that. I get the old saying of, well, I don't like them, but I love them. I think it's a way of us trying to feel good and trying to live out the gospel, but not get our hands dirty.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Keeps people away and convinces us we're still doing good and right. But that's not what.
Because how many times have you heard, well, Pastor, if you really knew my life, you wouldn't want me to come to church.
Oh, too many times.
Well, if you knew my life, you wouldn't want me to be a pastor.
I don't even know if I believe in God.
Yeah, like.
And here That's crazy. Like, because I do hear that, and people think that the goal of religion is to make bad people good, and it's just not what we see in the Gospels. Like, the goal of Christ's ministry when he was here, it was to make religious people aware of their self-righteousness. Like, that's what Jesus did. And then we take all of his sayings towards religious people, and then we convert them to be towards what he would have said towards unsaved people or pagans or what. And he actually had good things to say about, like, the Roman officer who would have been considered the pagan of his time. He's like, I haven't seen faith like this. And all of those religious people are there. And when you dive into the words of Jesus and you actually aim them back at the people they're meant for, it's like, this isn't meant to be a weapon against the world and non-Christians and whatever else you want to label them. This is for us. This is wake us up of our self-righteousness and get us to love better. And I have the hardest time as a pastor, like, whenever I'm out and about in the community and they learn I'm a pastor, they're like, oh, I was just caught morally speeding or something. He's going to give me a ticket right from God. And it's like, I hate it when they find out I'm a pastor, because it's like, no, I don't have a problem with you. I just wanted to talk to you. I like you. You're cool. You know, like, this is meant for the religious people. We need to wake up to our self-righteousness.
I had a friend one time we were out with, this was before my wife and I had kids, and he was single, but he's a good friend. He was a good friend. And when we were living in Alabama before we started moving around 50,000 times, and he would drink a beer with his meal. And, you know, here drinking is looked down upon, we hide it or whatever. And I remember his pastor, who I knew, walked in the restaurant, and we were kind of sitting towards the front door, and he scooted his beer over towards me because he didn't want his pastor to see it was in front of him. And I went, nope, you're going to drink. just be real, you know. I saw the stuff I preached too, now being out of it, going, oh, and I was a little harder than I needed to be. I didn't really know what love was, because it didn't produce results. Loving people doesn't produce results in the way the world wants us to produce, how the church world wants us to produce results. But I think we're starting to see some of the false narratives of that with some of the things that are crumbling.
Yeah, I mean, church attendance is plummeting. And the younger generation you get, then the less likely they are to, you know, be churched or grow up in church or affiliate with a church, or even their latest poll to believe in God. You know, like, I think it's 60, it was in the 60% range of, I think it was millennials that say they believe in God, which is the lowest poll that they've ever seen. In that, you know, the highest was back in World War II, was way up in the 90 percentile range of people that said they believe in God, not affiliate with anything, just believe that there's a greater being up there in the sky somewhere. And now that number is dropped down into the, 60 percentile range amongst some millennials. So that stuff is dropping. And I think, like the machine that you built that ran you over is, I don't know, I think the younger generation is just keener on that stuff. Maybe growing up in that postmodern question authority kind of a thing has produced some things like that where they're just, I don't know, they got the bullshit radar on full when they walk into my church. I see a college kid and I walk up to them and they are immediately skeptical, cynical, like, I don't know. And then, they hear what I have to say and then they'll be like, oh, this guy's actually pretty cool. But, that's their immediate reaction is, even if they grew up in church or were affiliated at a time, their immediate reaction is cynicism and distance. I think that there is just a growing distrust in religious organization in the modern day that I think we've earned with our abuse of power, tying ourselves to conservative Republican Trumpism. That was pretty much the unforgivable sin in many young people's eyes, that they saw it for what it was. And I had so many of my younger friends, that was their point of departure. They left at that point. And and as a pastor, it's hard because people have made their politics into their faith and their religion, and like they can't discern one between the other anymore. And it's like, to be a Christian means that you are a conservative, Republican, Trump, pro-lifer, whatever other buzzword you want to throw in there. Like, they go hand in hand. You can't be a different kind of Christian, which is weird. But that,
I would even push back to even say it's even that way on the more progressive side sometimes too.
That's what the meaning of polarity is there is another side to it, and they become the neo version of what they hate, know? And so you have the same
I'll
coin.
never forget one of my church people telling me he is the greatest thing since Jesus Christ.
Trump was?
And this was when he was he hadn't been elected president yet, but it was in the run. And I just I saw some things because of my history that I questioned. And I would even, and you could say, well, some people may go, well, he's probably just a liberal or progressive. I would say upbringing, I would probably lean more conservative on some things. It's not a one size fits all, but if some of my friends do some of that, they would think I've lost some here would think, oh, Paul's losing his soul, because I've heard them say it about other things, other people. I just want to find a place where people love. And the greatest place I've found, and this is sad, where I've found people that love me, that truly love me, usually have nothing to do with religion.
Yeah.
I don't know how to make friends outside of that.
How about a final question? We have diagnosed, we talked about some problems. We talked about what could be, like, what do we do in the meantime? Like, we're stuck in this middle place of, wow, everything is crumbling and falling apart and bus is running over so many people, but we know that this could be better than this, that we could build communities of authenticity around, the words that Jesus actually said and what they meant. And, but that's going to take some building and getting to. So what do we do in the meantime? What are some of the practices that you've done, that you've, kind of, what are the things that you do that help you in this liminal space of, between dark night and whatever is on the other side, or between, the being run over by the bus and now being a part of a different kind of a community somewhere? Like, how do you traverse that liminal space in the middle?
Well, some days are better than others.
Yeah, that's true.
I think the number one thing we have to do is slow down. I think the greatest gift, as bad as the pandemic, I think historians, I think sociologists will look back and say one of the greatest gifts out of that mess that was, and I'm not trying to be insensitive to people who lost loved ones or whatever, but is the need to slow down. I think, to be a very Southern saying, we need to get back to front porch sitting and slowing down and realizing what matters. Now, sometimes life has to teach us that, but a practice of slowing down, a practice of I call it getting my hands dirty. Like, yesterday I kind of had a rough day, and intentionally on my way home, I went, instead of going interstate, I went through the country and noticing the beauty of the mountains and the green grass. I think slowing down, getting your hands tangible on something, whatever's before you, realizing that 90% of the stuff we stress about, we can't control, but what can I control? So finding, whether that's gardening, fishing, whatever, something that helps ground us, makes us holistic, and realizes that we're a part of something greater going on, and being present in the moment. Learning to be present is, and I'm not very good at it. Meditation, silent meditation has been huge for me, and being honest about what really matters instead of what I think should matter, and realizing, being thankful for the things I do have. This 9 months has been some of the hardest time in my life, but I've also been the most thankful for things at the same time. More. So, yeah. If you go, well, what do we do with Jesus? I think we have to ask the question, what does it mean on my street where I live in my neighborhood for my neighbors to understand the love Jesus has for them? And so it grounds me to a place instead of, there's this whole big world, and there is, but it roots me back. And I think we need to get some kind of, the monks do it the best, I think. We got to do something to toll with our hands. We got to find some kind of work. And that can be a hobby. But the greatest, one of the holiest things for me is being able to do gaskets. And you say, well, that's dumb. Well, it grounds me. It puts me, in a time, in a place, in a moment, instead of being in my head, I don't know if that answered your question or.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds super, super practical. And, that's what I'm trying to do as a pastor, is not try to save the world, like I'm trying to serve my neighbors, and that is.
That may be baking cookies.
Yeah.
I think we just got to understand the long game.
Yeah, the long game. Like, we want the YouTube reel or the Facebook highlight for our church's social media page that gets people to come and show up and is dramatic and sexy and all that kind of stuff. And really there's nothing wrong with those highlighting the things that you're actually doing, but sometimes you're creating the machine that you need another one this week or people aren't going to pay attention to us. And then you're just playing the game. As you said, you're chasing the rabbit. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
Man.
And we'll definitely have some more conversations in the future because they're fun.
I'd love that. Thank you for the opportunity to be on.
Yeah. And there's so many different rabbit trails we could have jumped down, but we'll jump down some more of those rabbit trails at a different time. So, all right, I'm going to hit this stop record button because I don't know how to end podcasts yet. So.
Thank you for listening to the Liminal Living Podcast. If you're interested in spiritual direction to help you navigate through your dark night or deconstruction journey, please check out our website, www.liminalliving.org. We will see you next week. Blessings.
The living room is where you make life's most beautiful memories. But your sofa shouldn't be the one remembering them. The new life-resistant, high-performance furniture collection from Ashley is designed to withstand all the spills, slip-ups, and muddy paws that come with the best parts of life. Ashley high-performance sofas and recliners are soft, on-trend, and easy to clean. Shop the high-performance furniture in-store or online at ashley.com. Ashley, for the love of home.